basically, look, you might be right, but I have to say what.
Hold on. Sagar made some good points here. And I usually don't agree with Sagar, but he did make some good points.
And immediately making a judgment. I am saying through both experience, through observation, that.
Hold on. I just think that a lot of the arguments, the DEI arguments, are coming from a place of hatred, racism.
Instead, I would say, look, I don't care who you are. Can you do the job? Are we?
You know, these people didn't. They like the comment I just read. Like, you can't become a surgeon because they was trying to reach a quota. You're gonna have to pass all the exams. You're gonna have to show that you can do the job. Like the person they were talking about, who was the fire chief, the woman, and DEI and all of this. You think that that lady got that position and not know what the hell she's doing?
Cover up of the, the reality of climate change is ongoing. That cover up is on.
Hold on.
But
the only way it would is some sort of Manhattan Project level, which again is not going to happen.
That's the reason why people on the right, rather than acknowledging that the climate change has fueled these extreme catastrophes, which could help to mount.
They're arguing about climate change. Hold on, I'm looking for the spot. I'm sorry.
When the bigger picture here is
right.
clear.
But here's the problem: is that by denying the fact that there's these articles from the LA Times, like the LAFD is too white, seems like a bit of an issue. It seems.
Okay, it's right up in here.
To this particular situation, but also, help fuel the devastating hurricanes that flooded and, were a total disaster for Western North Carolina and other regions that have made Florida effectively uninsurable. Like, all of these things fit together, but instead it's DEI, it's wokeism, it's the fire department getting cut, whatever, when the bigger picture here is
right.
clear.
But here's the problem: is that by denying the fact that there's these articles from the LA Times, like the LAFD is too white, seems like a bit of an issue. It seems like a pure competence problem for me. I don't care what color or what gender. That lady
seemed pretty competent to me.
What's up?
That lady who's running the fire department seems pretty competent.
I'm not talking about her specifically. I'm talking about the fact that, that at a time in 2021, there literally were articles about DEI in the LA Fire Department. I think that's a problem. I think competency itself is the core for what all functions of life-saving organizations should be. I mean, I'm not going to get into specifically parsing, like, why are all these lesbians in the fire department, which appears to be like a vogue thing online. Instead, I would say, look, I don't care who you are. Can you do the job? Are we making sure the standards are there? And so that is, in my opinion, the problem is that nothing is ever comes to mitigation. And
what evidence do you have that any of them are not competent?
Oh, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying a culture around ensuring that we have more Black or lesbian firefighters does not seem to me to comport with a culture of competency itself.
You have no evidence.
Well, what am I supposed to go do a systematic study?
Yeah,
I mean,
yes, I expect there to be evidence if you make a claim.
Okay, then what evidence do you have that a pure white fire department can't do the best job? I mean, that's what I'm saying. DEI itself is a nonsensical thing that prioritizes equity for the sake of itself.
It's such a distraction, though. Like,
why is it a distraction?
How? Okay.
Yeah.
You think that if you had a man in charge of the fire department, they could have stopped the fires? Like, you have no evidence for that. You just assume that because it's a woman,
no, I didn't.
She's not good at the job, or because she's a lesbian, she's not good at the job.
What I'm saying is that there has been a priority.
Distraction from the core problem here, which is that you have a 1,200-year drought. You have the temperature, average temperature in Calvert is 5 degrees hotter. The Santa Ana winds are nothing new. The reason it is so devastating are because of those two factors. And that has nothing to do whether there's a Black person or a lesbian or a white lady or a white dude at the head of the fire department. Nothing to do with that.
What I am saying is that it is clear there was a culture in the state of California and in the LA Fire Department specifically to look at quote unquote equity over the last 3 to 4 year period. Do I think on average across all organizations, corporate, fire department, police, military, that culture competes with competency? Absolutely. Yes, I do. I am not personally indicting any of the people who are at the top of this or looking at their appearance and immediately making a judgment. I am saying through both experience, through observation, that DEI itself is something that is generally the enemy of competence. It is on the people who are going to racially discriminate against others to prove that racial discrimination or sexual discrimination is better for competency, which is the core function.
problem here?
That's not
What
what
do
I'm
you
talking
think-
about, though. But I'm saying,
but
that
why focus on it then if it's not that important?
because it obviously is important.
What is the number one factor here causing these fires in Europe
What is the number one
that
factor?
led to the devastation
Yeah,
of these
drought conditions and wind. Of
Okay,
course. Okay, I'm
so
not
let's
stupid.
talk about it.
Huh?
Let's talk-
We just did a whole
you
thing
just
about it.
dodge,
Yeah. Yeah.
climate change, whatever. Why are these lefties so obsessed with climate change?
Well, because
it's the number one thing driving this
is the one that
devastation,
has been
driving the
electorally
Western North
rejected now
Carolina
over and
devastation.
over.
That is not true.
No,
That
it
is
is.
just simply not true. Go look at how popular the Paris Climate Accords were.
Well, when
Go
Trump
look at
pulled
how
out of it, I
popular
don't remember
investments
it being
in
some big
green
problem.
go look at how popular investments in green energy are. But the thing is, Sagar, too, that you act like public opinion is just this static thing that just sits there and is what it is, versus something that is malleable and shapeable, and that people change their mind based on, I don't know, their home being destroyed by a climate-fueled catastrophe, whether they're here or in Western North Carolina. So yeah, I, as someone who analyzes these situations, of course, I'm going to focus on the number one factor that is causing these absolute cataclysms here and around the world, and really is going to contribute to destabilizing the entire globe.
So the reason why I talk about it is I think that the way it codes, and this is what many people who talk about it are not able to do, is they are unable to communicate this in a manner which does not tell American citizens that their lives are not going to be significantly curtailed, which I think the true reality of most of this discussion is, oh, we have to get rid of cars that have too much emissions. We have to significantly curtail the way that we consume goods. We have to reduce our quote unquote carbon footprint, which means what? Which means that the price of all this stuff is going to go up. Consumption itself is go down. I don't even necessarily think that's a bad thing per se. It's going to be tough in a hyper individualistic and consumer capitalist society, which is the United States. Most of the way that this stuff is communicated is usually you're the problem, our whole society is the issue, or some imaginary wealth tax of 50% is going to change everything. It's just not.
The bulk of emissions.
Well, it's kind of true what he was saying there, but why does it always come down to this? It's like, so, if something happens in a democratic state, then the Democrats suck. The reason why it happened, it was DEI, it was immigrants or whatever. So, but when something happens in a Republican controlled state, then they don't use those same arguments. I mean, the Democrats will attack them and say that it's poor leadership or whatever, it's MAGA or whatever. But that's what I mean, though. So like everything always boils down to these same arguments instead of like digging through the nuance and the complexities of the situation of what's happening. People want to boil things down to real simple concepts for them. And, so they don't have to think about it. They'll just say, well, it's a DI hire. And that's the reason why, things happened the way that they happened, or it's a Democrat run state. And that's the reason why, things happened or whatever, or the other side, their MAGAs and their white supremacists and their ultra nationalists or whatever. And that's the reason why these things happened, instead of actually digging through it and looking at because it's harder to do that. It's harder to do that. And people don't want to take the time, and, it's lazy thinking is what it is, sometimes both of the things can be true, or they can both be wrong, or it can have nothing to do with those things at all whatsoever. It can't just be, they might say, it's an act of God or whatever is the reason or whatever. And that's another simplification, even though, natural disasters happen, but how you prepare for them, how you react to them, what things did you have in place to deal with this inevitable reality? These are things that we do control. Okay. And those are the things that you want to focus on. And those are the things that you want to look at. Like what I said earlier about, do you really want to build a city in a place that, naturally has wildfires all the time? And if you do build a city in a place that naturally has wildfires, do you want to build it out of combustible materials? You know what I mean? These are the things that you want to look at, and talk about. And these are the things that can lead to better outcomes in the future. But talking about DEI or talking about MAGA or white supremacism, that isn't going to necessarily lead to better outcomes in the future. So we just end up in the same spot. It's like a dog chasing his tail, and you're just going in circles, and nothing ever improves, nothing ever changes. It always stays the same, and just keep having these arguments. It's like these self-righteous arguments. It's to make myself feel right, it make myself feel good, make myself feel superior, make me feel like my team is the team that, is winning and right or whatever, instead of digging through it and being like, well, sometimes my team makes bad decisions.
Emissions are from the, giant corporations and the wealthy. And by the way, what is going to increasingly fuel carbon emissions is this race for AI development, which is incredibly resource intensive, which we're having no conversation and debate about. But the reality is we have the technology to be able to do this. It just requires collective, yes, large scale, federal government led collective action.
Yeah, but significantly changing the American way of life, which I think people don't want to do.
I don't even think that's true.
But there are studies, for example, in Louisiana where they have major, there was the oil, I forget exactly the facilities that were there. There's a good book about it, and I'm removing the name. The people there who were the most affected by the oil industry and others are the most Republican, because they are like, listen, at the end of the day, even though they're literally being poisoned by some of the things around them. Because their livelihoods are tied to extraction. Yeah, but their point is that it's clear to me that the left, the Green New Deal, etc., wants to do away with my job, and I don't trust that they're going to do.
Because who told them that? It wasn't the left that told them that. It was the right that told them that.
So you think that they're brainwashed, or they can think for themselves? I think that they've looked at. I think they're right.
I think they've looked at the failures of the government in the past and things like NAFTA to be able to deliver quality of life. But I mean, again.
So I mean, we're the Industrial Revolution was kind of built on these industries, and all of the futuristic, or the state of man today is as a result of the way we've been using these resources historically, and our industries are reliant on it. So these things aren't going to really change overnight or anytime soon, really. But Crystal's argument that, these people who rely on these industries for their livelihood can still have a future, is true. They can be working in a different, the green energy stuff can end up benefiting them because they can end up working in those industries or whatever. So, but, and I've been watching a lot of stuff about the climate emergency or whatever, and they're really smart folks, and they're saying that oil isn't necessarily the problem, and getting rid of the oil isn't gonna fix the problem. So it's just more complicated than that. It's another one of those things that we want to simplify, and because the wind is not the answer, the nuclear is not the answer, there's all kinds of problems with solar at this point. Maybe that technology can improve in the future, but it's really the way that we do things that needs to change, and that is the argument that we don't want to. That's the conversation that we don't really want to have, So, but again, those people who are worried about losing their jobs because they work in the oil and gas or whatever, it's a fair thing for them to be worried about. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that they won't have, if the like Green New Deal type stuff has its way, that doesn't mean that those people won't have jobs. It'll just not be the same ones that they had historically, and it may end up working out in their benefit in the long run, related to, like, instead of working in a coal mine, you're working in a mining, a data mining, or like a crypto mining or something like that, which those things aren't good for the environment either, related to the amount of water it takes and the amount of energy that it uses. That's the reason why this stuff isn't really the answer. And when people say stuff like it's kind of a scam, I really do sympathize with them, because it's about making money. So this is going to be the new dominant industry. It's going to be the new oil, basically, and it's going to come along. The same stuff is going to come along with it that came along with the oil, and they're just going to dress it up in new packaging that's prettier or whatever.
Again, I'm not saying it's an easy problem, but how's the American way of life going in LA right now? How's the American way of life going in Asheville, North Carolina right now? How's the American way of life going in huge parts of the Gulf Coast that have been devastated by hurricanes and are going to be? How's the American way of life going in Miami, where when it rains, it just floods the whole city?
And that's the thing that does frustrate me, though, because the evidence is clear. Climate change is happening. It's a real thing. Like, there's no argument to that. What we're gonna do about it is the question. And there you can make an argument. Is it really the activities of humans, or is it more related to the cycle? But then if you talk about the Holocene, where they talk about like the age of humans having the greatest impact on the environment, I mean, you can't look around and feel like humans aren't having this huge great impact on the planet, as far as the way the systems go, as far as the biodiversity, as far as the pollutants. At the very least, any one of us out here, even if you're you don't believe in climate change, you have to believe in pollution. Like polluting the ocean, pollution in the air. This stuff is going to affect you, and does affect you without a doubt. You could put the climate change to the side and just focus on the pollution part, the microplastics and all of this, and it's landing in your food. You're breathing in particulates that's floating around in the air. The animals are eating the trash, and then you're eating the animals. It's affecting you, okay? And it's a problem that needs to be dealt with. So, but as long as you're like, oh, the environmental thing is all just a scam, then the corporations get to continue to, put toxic waste in your cereal.
So yeah, there would be a cost. There would be a transition period, but the consequences of not acting, like, you ignore the consequences of not acting.
Oh, I'm not ignoring.
And those are absolutely grave and dire. And instead, want to talk about like, oh, there's a lesbian in charge of the fire department. Isn't that the real problem?
See,
no,
I
it's
think
not
that's
the
a
real
straw
fucking
man
problem.
too, for the fact that we're talking about DEI itself, which has been pervaded through the California government. But beyond that, which is bringing it to a democratic question, people have been bombarded with propaganda since I was probably born that, oh, everything is horrible, the sea levels are going to rise. Many of these predictions don't end up being true,
yes.
Which then no, but it's not, because people said, oh, X amount of coastline was going to disappear by, 2025, didn't happen. The same, catastrophic language is being used over and over again. People don't feel or see the fact that things are changing all that much beyond hurricanes and or fires. I think we should
see, like, the thing is, things happen gradually. Change happens gradually until you reach tipping points where then there's drastic changes. And that doesn't mean that, it's not true what they were saying. But in his defense, the doom and gloom story that you're getting told, it kind of just wears you out, where they're like, oh, the world's going to come to an end or whatever. And, it's like Thunberg, Gretchen, what is her name? And she used to be in the news a lot when she was just talking about climate change. And because I think that goes along with their agenda. But then when she started connecting the dots related to colonialism, and exploitation of the the East and the global South countries, she started to get less and less media attention, because just screaming about the doom and gloom of climate change and the world's coming to an end works with their narrative and works with where they want to be. So like people are just looking at something like it's an impossible thing to deal with. So, and it's way too big for me to even like comprehend. So I need to give it away to the specialists and the experts or whatever, and whatever decisions that they make or whatever, we're just going to defer to them and just go with that. And then they have their agenda related to that. It's going to have to do with making money. Like I say, it's going to be the biggest freaking way to make money going into the future is this kind of thing. So, and they want us to just defer to them and not really just kind of, think it through for ourselves. But when you start connecting the dots related to oppression, global South, and economics, and all of this, then they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Solidarity across the world related to global South issues. They're like, whoa, 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 whoa. No more media coverage for this person. But, saying that the things aren't happening is kind of like denying what's right in front of your eyes. I mean, like as the weather continue to get more and more intense, what are people going to say? They're going to continue to say that, the climate change thing is not real. Like what would it take? What would it take for these people to acknowledge that it's a real thing? And it become a left and right argument where it's like supposedly the left is the ones that's saying climate change is really real, and then you got the right saying that it's not. Like, how did we get to that point? I think that is another thing related to the system of manipulation, that if you're conservative, then you're supposed to think that climate change is not real, and if you're on the left, you're supposed to think that it is real. Like, how did that dynamic happen? I'm saying, what is denying climate change? How does that fall under conservatism?
Should speak pragmatically. We can both accept that there will be more fire, more hurricane, etc., and say, okay, so what are we going to do about that? Well, we have to invest a lot more money in this and this. We don't necessarily need to say, oh, all electric cars are going to be driven in the state of California by 2030. Ridiculous, absurd, never going to happen in the first place. At the end of the day, it's about a consumptive mindset, which fundamentally, you're talking there about transition. That requires a lot of trust from people that their lives and their jobs and all this quote unquote just transition language was going to happen. I don't think there is any reason after the failures of COVID or after the last 5 years to say that would be competently managed, or it would be one in which we should, as a vision, buy into. We have probably one of the most atomized, individualistic times in modern American history. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And immigration being number one, but in all of that, absurd. You will not get to a point where everyone's just going to buy into this kumbaya, like, oh, I'm going to give up, 30% of my consumption for a quote.
Man, he's making a absolutely right on point there. Like, he's absolutely spot on with that. But what it makes me think about is like the infrastructure, because again, you cannot believe in climate change or whatever, but you can, realize that the infrastructure needs attention. You know what I mean? We shouldn't have bridges that collapse just because a ship hit it. We shouldn't have whole neighborhoods that burn down because there was a fire. We shouldn't have water systems that haven't been updated in my lifetime. You know what I mean? They still have pipes, that have materials that are toxic, were made out of toxic materials, these kinds of things. So like, at the very least, we need to focus on, improving the infrastructure, and lots of money, approving lots of money to go in that direction, you know, and if they have to put it under the label of climate change or the Green New Deal or whatever, but the result is improvement of the infrastructures, then whether you believe in it or not, you should be able to be like, boom, we need this infrastructure funding for infrastructure. We need to go with that instead of being like full stop because they're talking about the Green New Deal or whatever. And I'm against that because I think it's a scam. But what Sagar is saying about people having to buy into this and then trust the government and then being able, you know, wanting to change their lifestyles dramatically as a result, it's something that's going to be a real tough sell. That's going to be I don't think it's possible for the majority of people. Like, and there goes that word force again, because how else are you going to get people to do it? And then people are going to push back even more if you're trying to force them to adjust their lifestyle. It would have to be that they volunteer, you know, to adjust their lifestyles, you know, dramatically for the sake of the planet, you know. But we have to sell this to people as it's an advantage to them. Like they're going to benefit from it, even though like their life will change, their life will be better. And then the lives of their children and grandchildren is going to be better. The health of the ecosystem, the health of the planet, you know what I mean, will be better, you know. But as far as like, you know, the weather having more intense storms and more intense, you know, weather events is going to continue to happen. So then they're going to be like, well, look, I changed my lifestyle and, you know, I'm living this minimalist lifestyle and I'm still having to deal with wildfires and extreme hurricanes and floods and droughts and shit. And then you have the people that's going to argue and say that, well, we've had these droughts and hurricanes and floods, you know, throughout time. And, you know, so when people ask, you ask someone, they're like, oh, it was really hot this past summer. They're like, I remember back in 1982 and it was much hotter than da 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 da. But then it's like, okay, bro, we got like the data. The data is not anecdotal like your perceived experience of how hot it was, you know. And because it's hot in a local place or cool in a local place, you know, doesn't dispute the data of this constant increasing of surface temperature and ocean surface temperature and, you know, amount of carbon in the atmosphere and stuff like that. Like you can't argue with that data.
You're just like making that up.
No, I'm not.
You
because
are.
Donald Trump just won
You
the popular
completely
vote.
are. But
Who is against electric vehicle mandates?
Sorry,
Like,
what I'm saying you're making up is the 30. You're going to have to reduce your consumption 30%. Blah blah blah.
Well, I think
maybe if you're like, you know, one of an Elon Musk of the world, maybe that might require some sacrifice. But I mean, what you're basically saying is we can't solve any big collective.
No, I'm not saying
together.
Can't solve
like
it.
just give up.
We
cannot solve any big collective problem. We're too atomized. We're too individual. So forget about it. Just let her rip and hope that you're one of the people who can afford the private firefighters when it comes for your house, because that's the track that we're on right now. Is just basically like every man for themselves. If you're rich, you can rebuild. If you're poor, like, sorry, you can't get home insurance, you're screwed. And, you know, the fire department is being cut because billionaires don't want to pay taxes. So you're just basically have to pray that you and your loved ones are going to be able to make it.
Probably, look, I'm not defending billionaire tax levels, but don't they pay the most tax than anybody else in the state of California? I mean, that's what I'm talking about. This is a state with
what percent of their income do they pay in taxes?
Probably 5 to 7.
Next to nothing.
By the way, I'm not defending.
Elon Musk pays next to nothing in taxes.
I am not defending billionaire tax rates. What I'm saying is California is a G7 nation in and of itself. I think it would be G5 if it were its own independent country. So the idea it's not wealthy enough to handle this seems ridiculous to me. There are plenty of developed nations all across the world that seem to have a much better and more competent fire and hurricane disaster relief, Japan being one of them. My point is that it's clear within the context of mitigation itself, a lot more can be done. Democratically, if you want to continue to make the case for lack of consumption, etc., you can. I don't think it's going to work. I mean, I think the most honest discussion of climate change we ever had was who was the person who made the documentary with Michael Moore? I'm forgetting the name of it. And we talked a lot about it here over at Rising. We even interviewed him. And he was the most honest person because he's like, yeah, we have to radically cut consumption. I mean, actual quiet part out loud that came from most of the people who study carbon emissions, et cetera, was what was the single most important thing for drop of carbon emissions. It's when everybody stayed at home during COVID. That's the truth. That's, if you actually wanted to see it, a dramatic cut. All of us have to stay at home, reduce our consumption, stay inside. People don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's kind of extreme to say stay in the house and don't move around at all. But wouldn't it be nice if we had like a holiday or something like that where everyone stayed home or whatever? Like we have Earth Day, but to celebrate Earth Day, it would be to just like no travel, no air traffic, people pretty much just kind of stayed in their neighborhoods, no going to work, no going to school, just, family time, community time, just like, no driving, road trips, none of that. And wouldn't that be a beautiful thing, if we did that one day every year, I mean, I think that could be done and it would be a great idea. I remember when COVID happened and we saw the pictures of the animals, it was like the sheep and the birds, and it looked like that nature like rebounded like that, like instantly. We can imagine what the earth would be like without humans. It would be beautiful. I ain't gonna lie. Like it would be, the resilience of the earth, the resilience of the ecosystem and the biosphere is amazing. And just that short amount of time of us being locked up in our houses, the air cleared up. There's so much evidence, you guys. Go back and look at it. It was beautiful. I was reading this stuff. I was bored as hell anyways. And I'm always into this kind of stuff. And I was really, really it gave me a really good feeling to see, the pictures of like the air, clear air. You could see the stars better at night. It was animals roaming around. It was a beautiful thing for the earth. It was really beautiful. So, the impact of us moving around every day, doing our everyday activities is kind of like is the problem. But it's extreme for Saga to say, oh, y'all just gonna have to stay in the house and y'all can't move around and y'all can't go nowhere. Like that is an extremist perspective that's like trying to belittle the situation and make it like it's impossible, it's untenable, and people aren't going to want to do that. And it's like, no one's going to be it's not realistic to say that people got to stay in their house, and not go anywhere. And that's what's going to save the planet, which it would save the planet, but it's not realistic that would be the outcome. Like that would also kill the economies. Look at what happened with the economies as a result of COVID. And then they had to give out money to people to keep the stuff going and print money basically to do it. And like, how long could you pull that off without everything like completely collapsing? It's unrealistic, and it's silly to even make that statement.
That's
We
really
live
not true.
in a democratic society.
It just requires, first of all, renewable energy technology has improved dramatically. In particular, solar has improved dramatically.
Yes, but how is it made? It's made in China from filthy, materials. It has a ton of emissions. The lifetime offset of a solar panel in the United States will never offset the amount that it requires to make it. This is the problem.
You have to.
And that was true. And also, after those batteries are used up, they're discarded and thrown into like the trash dump, and they don't biodegrade. Like they're just there for like forever. And then they emit like some toxic ass chemicals. Like solar isn't the answer as far as the present technology for it is.
We
You
want to
have
make these windmills, which again are not efficient. They have what, 10 to 25% carrying. The most efficient power that we have is called nuclear power. Nobody wants to build it. Everyone's too afraid.
That's not true either.
No, that's actually true. Though, and those windmills have to be maintained, and they create a lot of trash, and they don't have as much output either. And the nuclear, I mean, like, no, I don't want a nuclear power plant next to my house either. You know what I'm saying? I don't. And so, like, that's a problem. But see, there's other innovations. Like, I've seen some stuff where they have the things next to the freeways where it just kind of harnesses the wind pressure that's getting pushed by the cars going by, and it turns a turbine and it creates electricity. Like, again, that's not that much, but that could be scaled up, and that kind of way of thinking is what you want. Even though I don't like the cars at all, you know, that they should be extremely limited, period. The electric cars are not the answer. Building all of these freeways is not the answer. The mass transit is the answer. With that, you know, we can have fast moving trains, and that'll compete with the air traffic, like the airplanes, and be more efficient than the airplanes, at least within a continent. You know, so the flights should only be international flights, and then the locally you should be able to take trains, and that would be the answer with that.
I mean, even the climate left has embraced nuclear. Like Greta has
Great.
embraced
When's the next reactor coming
nuclear.
on? It's not going to happen.
Again,
right?
Sagar, like, okay, so the way things are is just how they're going to be. That's your position.
No,
and I find that really, look, you might be right, but I have to say what I think would make a better situation where we don't have to constantly be, you know, watching people tearfully talk about how all their possessions are lost and they've had to flee the home that they've lived in for decades and decades, and where parts of the country are just increasingly uninhabitable, and where
they built those houses out of wood. I have some clips, I might share it, of homes that were still standing after the fire because they were built with different materials. Like, we don't have to build with the materials that we build. And again, some places there should be no cities.
Where you can't be insured, and where, you know, the only people who have a prayer of like surviving in a reasonable fashion are the wealthy who can pay for the private firefighters and, you know, rebuild even if they don't have homeowners insurance. Like, you might be right that we're too far gone to be able to deal with it. We certainly have not dealt with it to this point. But it's just not true that the technology doesn't exist. The technology does exist. What doesn't exist is the will to actually have the collective action required to try to tackle this problem in a serious way, which, you're right, at this point will require a lot of mitigation, but also, you know, rather than just letting it rip and see what happens when it's 2 degrees Celsius and when it's 5 degrees Celsius, to actually try to, you know, get the trends under control, because we do have the technology now to be able to
I think we do.
that.
We've had the technology since 1970s called nuclear.
Yeah. Let's read some comments. I think that they did a good job of arguing the topics, and that's why I like this show, because, you know, you got Crystal pretty much coming from the left, and you got Saga pretty much coming from the right. And these conversations are really how we move anything forward, because people have to be able to come from, you know, their perspective and be honest or whatever. And then we have to actually talk about it. I really believe that these conversations, you know, lead to revolutions, like lead to real solutions. Like, if we can't have the conversation, then we'll never be able to, you know, move forward. Comments, it says, over the past few months, Crystal and Saga have been giving me the same feelings I felt in months leading up to my parents' divorce. You know, but that's really, I mean, it got pretty heated on this one, their exchanges. But that's also what they built the show off of. They built it off of their the conflict between the two of them, which you don't really get, which is really good because most of the media is always from one perspective, from one side. And you don't, that's all you get, so it becomes that echo chamber, and people just watch the news for them to tell them what they already believe, like, and you don't come away from it knowing any more, or learning anything, or having your perspectives challenged at all. I think every news media outlet should have, different perspectives, somebody from the left and somebody from the right. They all should have it, but it's not like that. It doesn't work out that way. Whenever they do bring somebody from the other side or whatever, they just bash them. And it's always like a gang too. It'll be 4 against 1, 5 against 1. And it just becomes like a yelling match. Another comment that says, "You're not fixing the climate before the next fire season. Might want to figure something out." I'm saying. Another comment, no, it's timestamp 24/17. "No, Crystal, it's not about putting white men in charge. Sager is saying the best person needs to have the job, period. DEI has no place when lives are at stake." See, I hate that, something terrible happens and then we start saying DEI, it is the problem. Like somebody's gonna die because y'all are putting value in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like these people who got into these positions had to be qualified to get into those positions. So they are qualified to do the job. It's simple as that. There's no way, they're not going to hire people, that aren't qualified, bro. It doesn't happen like that. As Crystal is fast becoming the exact example of what the show used to stand against, not listening and strawmanning arguments. A crisis of competence is undeniable at this point. She was kind of doing that to him, like and interrupting him and like kind of using these straw man arguments. She was doing that. Another comment, it says, "Californian here. Oligarchs didn't start the fire. DEI didn't start the fire. Inept California politicians didn't start the fire, but they all contributed to the lack of preparation and anemic response." Fair enough. That's a fair enough statement right there. Another comment, it says, "This is one of the wealthiest zip codes and cities in the U.S. with crazy high taxes. Why the heck do they have budget problems? Like, where is the money going? What are y'all spending the money on? Obviously not the right things. It shouldn't have been no reservoirs that wasn't completely filled. I saw a story where this dude, he bought a sprinkler system, just one of the regular cheap flapping back and forth type sprinkler system, the kinds you use to like water your lawn, and some water hoses, and he put them on the top of his house and left when the evacuations happened. And he came back and his house was there, and all his neighbors' houses had burned down. And it's like, that seemed like a really simple solution right there. Like, what couldn't they have had some kind of systems, something like that, ready to go for these kind of circumstances, knowing that they live in that the city is in a area that's prone to wildfires? As much money as they have, as big a budget that they have. Another comment says, "I can't believe Crystal just said there's only so much you can do, then gave a list of 10 simple things they could have done." Another comment says, "Crystal's headstone will read, frequently wrong, never in doubt." Another comment, "Crystal clearly hasn't seen the video of one of the heads of the LA Fire Department saying, She shouldn't be expected to pull someone's husband out of the fire, and instead they should question why they are in that situation in the first place. I don't really know what that means. Another one, it says Crystal was being terrible listener at 2410. Very unfortunate the way she is unfairly putting words into Sager's mouth here. Another comment, did Crystal not hear the lady accuse a man of being in the wrong place? If she has to save him, the mentality will cost lives. That mentality will cost lives. So is that related to the DEI thing? Is that what they're saying? I mean, I don't know. Another comment, Crystal whining that Sager points out things she doesn't like. What's new? Another one, 1856, Crystal is wrong. The Palisades Reservoir was empty and has been empty for a year because the government refuses to fix it. Yeah, in the video, I didn't play that part, but she mentioned all of the other reservoirs that had water, but she didn't mention the one that didn't. Another comment, it says, how in the F is one focused on the fact that the reservoir was empty and the fire chief said she didn't know and wasn't her concern? The fire chief's job is to put out fires. Her job is not to ensure that the water is there. That is someone else's responsibility. Okay. Like, you delegate responsibilities because, you know, one person can't handle everything. You have municipalities, you have bureaucracy, you have, you know, all these levers, all of these moving parts or whatever. Her, as the fire chief, her job is to, you know, be in charge of the fire department, of the personnel, you know, of making sure that she has her equipment and everything is up to code and her firefighters are trained and they take care of business. Her job is not to make sure that the reservoir has water in it. That's not her job. Another comment says, show the clip of the LA firefighter saying, if she has to carry her husband out of a fire, then they were in the wrong place. I'm sure that comment would make anyone feel confident in their fire department. Why is everybody saying the same shit? Another one, I mean, the rest of it, it says, hey, firefighter Lawson, there is a father with his kid in the house, which is on fire. We need to get them out. Sounds like they're in the wrong place if they had to get them out, chief. I don't know what the context was of that comment, and I watched a lot of videos and I didn't see that. Maybe I just missed it, or maybe I skipped over it or whatever. So I don't know what the context was for that. I mean, maybe it had to do with them saying that they did send evacuation orders out. So I don't know what I'm not going to speculate. Another comment, it says, Crystal has become insufferable. She barely lets Sager get a word in. She was doing that in this one. Another comment, she has said climate catastrophe 5 times in the first 5 minutes. Another comment, the amount of time Crystal put words in Sager's mouth was wild. She was not willing to listen to him at all. Kudos to Sager. He was being really patient too. Another comment, blaming climate change does a good job of taking the blame off of leadership. Okay. So, I mean, as far as having preventative measures, yes. As far as the fire happening, no. They historically have fires there. If nobody was there, if there was no town there, there was no power lines, there wasn't no asshole smoking cigarettes or deliberately starting fires, you would still have wildfires in that area. Okay, so you can't blame the leadership for a fire happening. You can blame them for their response. You can blame them for their lack of preventative measures. You can blame them for the lack of infrastructures or things in place to deal with it. But the fire happened. It was a natural thing, and you can't blame them for that. Comment says 2415 timestamp. I feel like these are non-sequitur issues. Non-sequitur. We can address climate change to solve long-term issues while also acknowledging DEI's identity politics, culture war nonsense, and has not led to better outcomes. We can see that California has spent millions to create a better water system, and 8 years later, not a single project has been completed. Yeah, so the DEI was the reason why they spent millions to create a better water system, and 8 years later, not a single project had been completed. Is that what you're saying? What evidence do you have to lead to that conclusion? You know, if there wasn't any diversity in their departments, do you think that their water systems would have been improved? Is that what you're saying? What evidence do you have to support that? Historically, has it been, no diversity in their departments and everything just went great? Another comment says the insurance thing is being misstated. They tried working with the state so they could stay and insure people. They told the state about the brush building up that they were specifically seeing around their customers' homes. They said they needed to increase their rates to cover the risk, and they were not allowed through policy. They told the administrators that they were going to have to pull out of California. No policies were canceled. They chose to no longer offer policies in California, and as the policies expired, they didn't renew them. Yeah, I mean, they're trying to make money, so they're mitigating their risk to have to pay out settlements, and looking at it from their perspective, you can't really blame them for that. Again, you probably shouldn't build cities in places that have wildfires, but California was doing some things that wasn't wise, because the same people talking about climate change and the environment was pushing against those controlled burns and the cutting of the trees, the like brush removal, as far as like trimming the trees and stuff like that. That stuff would have went a long way to mitigating this fire and keeping it from being as crazy as it was. The Aboriginal Americans that lived in that area prior to colonization, they did do, they teach us all in elementary school about like slash and burn and all of that, and those kind of deals. And they were talking about it like it was some caveman tactic or whatever, but it was actually a good thing that they were doing. And these forests rebound from these fires really quickly because the native plants have resistance to it, and it'll actually some seeds pop or as a result of the fire, like they make them grow, like they stimulate them and they spread them out and stuff like that. So one of the issues is, I was looking at this post that the dude was talking about the eucalyptus trees and how it's an invasive species, and it's highly flammable, and it's it's not native to the area, and they were planting a lot of those because they were trying to make money or whatever. But you have the old growth redwood trees, and a lot of those trees are fire resistant. Like they can handle those fires and still stand, but those eucalyptus trees can't, and a lot of those other non native plants can't, and they create all of this brush and all of these perfect circumstances for these fires to get completely out of control. So that's another thing that hasn't been stated in the conversation, is about local habitats and destroying the native plants and the biodiversity that needs to be there, you know, that helps keep from these things being as crazy as they are. The fires are going to happen, but if you have these old growth redwood trees, they're so tall and they have really thick bark. They will break the wind, you know, they will keep the fire from spreading so quickly, you know. When you clear areas and you build a city of houses made out of wood, and then you plant eucalyptus trees, and you don't clean the brush that's coming off of the trees, and you don't do you don't let the natural fires burn, then you this is what you get. You decide to build $1 million house in natural fire alley, then you get what you get, man. And I feel for all the people who lost everything, and it's really sad. But humans, we do silly things, you know. It's really an insane society that we live in, and it's so insane that, you know, the sane person seems crazy when he's like, you know, maybe you shouldn't build a house over there. You know, get out of here, man. The weather is wonderful over here. Okay, I mean, you know, fires happen all the time over there, so maybe you shouldn't plant eucalyptus trees over here. Get out of here, man. I make a lot of money off of this, bro. We make these into paper. We sell the oils off of these, you know. This is money. Okay. All right. Keep on doing what you do. Have fun with that. Let me know how that works out. Comments. It says Crystal is beyond repair. Let her leave for MSNBC 2.5. Another. Well, what makes this channel good is that you have Crystal and you have Sagar. You have one without the other. It's not nearly as good of a channel. You need both sides of this. Another comment says, did Crystal really say that California is suffering a 1,200-year drought after she said the reservoirs were full? You can have a drought and still have water in those reservoirs, bro. It is a drought that has been happening. You know, those reservoirs, the water come from far away, like even some cases out of state. So they bring that water in from other places. So locally, yes, drought, still having reservoirs, because the way that they're built, they have like the concrete sides where they don't have the water seeping into the earth, you know. Bro, come on, bro. Show me you don't know what you're talking about without showing me you don't know what you're talking about. Another comment says, I wonder if Crystal truly believes what comes out of her mouth. Damn, all of these comments are freaking on Sagar's side. Another comment, wow, Sagar actually pushing back. I haven't watched in a while. Is this something he's doing regularly now? Another comment says, Crystal is an activist, not a reporter. That's kind of a fair comment right there. Another one, it says, the beauty of digital media is that you can pause the show while you run to the store and get popcorn. Another comment is, yeah, because this was good. That's the reason why I'm sharing this. It's one of the better episodes I've seen. I haven't been watching Breaking Points as much as I used to when they first started. I was watching them when they were on The Hills Rising. I didn't know anything about The Hills Rising, and somehow I came across a Crystal and Sagar on The Hill, and I was just watching it from then on. And then, you know, The Hill was censoring them in ways that they didn't like, so they ended up leaving. And then they started this Breaking Points, and Breaking Points is competing with a lot of the news media channels or whatever. Like, they get more views than, I don't know, probably MSNBC, CNN, you know, CBS. They get a lot of views. And I think it's because of the way that they do it with the left-right deal. And then they cover stories that we kind of care about or whatever. Like, they come at it with angles without like this framing of the national perspective or whatever, like the status quo frame. investigate both sides of the argument, come up with your own conclusions.
Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah.